Afternoon, it's great to be here. And my topic is countering hate. And just as some quick background, like many of you, too many of us, we've been impacted by extremism over time. I grew up hearing about my great uncle who died as a prisoner of war in Korea. And then went into adulthood. I was involved in a terrorist incident in Paris where a colleague's wife was killed on a subway. As 9/11, has a few friends passed away, and anthrax attack in New York City, and so on. Too many situations. So I thought, how do I get back? What's the right way to do that? And over time, I was fortunate enough to be asked to teach at the State Department, which I still do, on how to counter Russian disinformation and how to counter terrorism through digital techniques. And that led to a journey of how do you actually counter hate, and what is actually going on, and why does bias, hate, and extremism form and sometimes lead to violence, and more importantly, what can we all do about it? Because what I realized is there's so many, as you know, so many people in this world who want to do the right thing. What does that mean? So let's just take a quick journey, TED Talk-like, on what I've learned so far. And I just wrote a book on this topic with Harun Ullah, who has countered terrorism for many years in the State Department for 3 secretaries of state. So the first is, if we are honest about it, we're all the same. It doesn't matter where we're born. It could be Detroit, Damascus, Lahore, doesn't matter. We are the same. Something happens to us over time, good or bad. There's about 300,000 people that are born every single day on this earth. And so it gives us an opportunity to change things every single day if we make the right steps with that group of people. So if we look at that, we think, how do our brains work? And when we teach at the State Department, we think about things like, how does the brain form? When are people most susceptible to learning and taking in the right memories and things like that? And basically, between birth and age 25 is the majority of the impact you can make on a human being. It doesn't mean we can't all change and evolve over the years. We all like to think we can, but the best time to do it is actually before 25, and it's really between 10 and 25 when you get right down to it. So if we then think about that, we think, what's happening? And what's really happening during those years is that our memories and our habits are being stored in our brains for reference for the rest of our lives. That's why some people have more difficulty dealing with extremists. That's why some people are more susceptible. That's why some of us can never even think about doing that. So, but if you think about your own brain, what happens is, think about music and the favorite music you have. It's usually from high school or college. You know, it could be something you just heard on 6th Street, but the reality is a lot of what we like is imprinted in us very early in our lives. Now, if we go into how do we reach people, marketers, I am a marketer, but marketers always think of how to reach people at a given time to reach them, to sell them something, you know, or to shape their behavior. And we talk about things in segments. We talk about millennials or Gen Z or boomers. And that's not at all the way to look at people who we want to actually impact and help counter hate. We have to think of what we would call perpetual Gen Now generation. There is no branding for it. It's the continual generation of people who are 0 to 25. We have to continually help youth to really combat the problem. Now, if we think of like what's happening to youth worldwide today, we took a very deep look at this, and I'm going to give you a couple highlights. The first is what we call the 5,000-day habit. So between age 10 and 25, for the majority of the world, the average person in the world gets a cell phone at the age of 10.3. And for 5,700 plus days, this is the center of their world, every single day. This is where they get all their information, all their socialization. This is where their friends are talking to them. This is where they're figuring out what to do. This is the main habit. It's the center of their universe. And when we look at that, we have to say, okay, what's actually happening in this, what we would call a digital playground? And one of the things that, if we're in the Western world, we're so TV oriented, and we think that, TV, and we now realize social media is important. But for the majority of the world, they totally skip that. And so what's really going on is if you actually look at the Middle East and Southeast Asia, for example, there's not a single newspaper in the top 50. Newspapers are not relevant to people who are in those parts of the world. If you look at Iran as an example, Iran has 3 major state television stations. They broadcast right to Facebook. They're really doing a great job, actually, of mixing in political commentary with entertainment and things like that to make it so it's semi-attractive for people to go in. But they have very, very clear messaging that they're doing right into social, right into that phone, form those habits and those memories. And then people are far more important than media outlets. So we have a tendency in the Western world to think Financial Times, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, what does CNN think? The majority of the world, as you probably know, and maybe this is a good thing, could care less about what cable news is saying. Absolutely could care less. There's people they do care about, like Mohammed Al-Arif, who is in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He has over 21.5 million followers on Twitter. He's extremely active. And what he says not only impacts the kingdom, it impacts the Middle East, it impacts the world. What is he saying? So we're not even thinking that way in most cases, that these are folks influencing our youth. The other thing is, we don't have a lot of time to get people's attention if we want to reach them. So Facebook has about roughly 9 billion video views a day. And they say you have 3 seconds to get people's attention or they go away. I was just recently with the folks at Snapchat, and there were more Snapchats, more than 1 trillion, than there were all photos taken in all cameras in the world last year. So 159 million people took more photos than all the people with cameras worldwide, which is nuts. It tells you, like, the heck are these kids doing as they're taking all these photos, but we're all chronicling our day. 2 seconds to get people's attention. The good news is if you do that, people will hang in there for minutes. But we have to change how we communicate in order to reach youth, to really get them to pay attention. We can't come in with the sermons, we can't come in with the big messages, we can't come in with the big videos. They could care less. Now, Web War III is going full tilt. Whether it's Russian disinformation, China is making a big push here. Most countries are doing this. And what you see, particularly with Russia, but not just Russia, is it's, yes, fake news. There's an increase in fake content, and there's an increase in fake people. And I'll show you just a little example here. But when you think of what we see today, it's just the beginning. They're learning how to actually take fake content and move news cycles so you actually think something is happening that's not happening. They're able to actually change images in photos. They're able to change people in videos. You're able to use natural language processing and change stories, so there's only one message that's off and all the rest is accurate. So the ability to fool us is going to exponentially increase and come through this phone, reaching the people that are forming the habits that represent our youth. So this isn't about Facebook and did they do something wrong? Who cares? This is about us getting really good at understanding how to reach youth through social. Now, fake networks, they're easy to see. We happen to store all the Twitter accounts in the world. There's about 990 million of them. When you look at them, you can see fake news a mile away. It's on the right side. It's a machine-led effort, looks fake, but you can see it. If you look on the left, those are human beings actually speaking. What you actually see with fake news is it's often a pyramid like this. The first part of the pyramid, these are people who have 100, 200,000 followers, bios, photos. They look great. They look like anyone in this room. And they're just pumping out keywords. And the keywords don't violate any standards. And they link to sites often. And then the next group retweets them. And they also look like real people. And they have about 5 to 10,000 followers usually. And then the next layers, third and fourth and beyond, are totally fake. But they're all retweeting. And so they fool the search engines who think that this is real. So then they feature content. And that's how counterfeit goods are sold. Well, it only takes a half-smart person to realize, wait a second, we can start to move people easier and see who actually likes extremist type stuff and move them to the right sites so we can actually reach them more effectively. So my only point on this is that the digital sophistication of the people that we're fighting against is increasing rapidly. Now, what does not work? What does not work, counter-protests are counterproductive. If we think of how the brain works, the way the brain works is that if I say to you, I'm not really saying, I don't mean this, but like, you're not smart, you're not doing this thing right, you shouldn't protest here. What happens in our brain is, I'll show you, and I think I'm going to try harder, I'm going to go over here and do something, I'm going to make sure that I actually win. Now, if you don't believe that, if any of you have kids, how do you get your kids to do something? Tell them not to do something, right? We all know that that's work. That's how our brains work. So counter-protesting, which we do often here in the United States, is actually the opposite of what we should be doing. Deleting accounts, like Twitter, will proclaim, hey, we just deleted 300,000 accounts this month. Isn't this great? It's not. The more that you delete accounts, the more you make it, you accelerate innovation of bad actors who realize they should go in the dark web, they should go into encrypted sites, and they get smarter quicker. I would rather have people be less smart out in the open so we can actually see what they're doing, so we could find them and figure out what to do. So we're actually causing our own problems by thinking that we're cleaning things up quickly, because it makes us feel good. And that leads to the next thing here, which is that our desire for privacy, and I totally believe in privacy and we should all have those rights, completely agree. But the rules and regulations that we have are exactly what a bad actor wants, because it makes it hard to track them, it makes it hard to store with their data, it makes it harder for us to profile them, it makes it harder for us to get their phone records, all these kinds of things. So it's basically a camouflage for them. So we have to start thinking more about, are we getting rules and regs that work for us, but what about the criminality that we're going against, and what do we do about that? And how do we strike that balance? These are conversations we're not having enough of today. Now, the bad actors are great marketers. We study ISIS, we study Al-Qaeda, we study all these groups. They are excellent. They know how to use imagery, they'll have cats in their hand, they use youthful-looking people. There are messages, if you look at them and listen to them, are actually generally fairly inspiring. And I hate to say it like this, but if you're susceptible to this, it feels somewhat patriotic in a way. Like, I'm going to do the right thing, I'm going to be helping my family, this is the right thing for me. And so we just have to be respectful of that and say, they're good. So how do we actually counter that? So, another thing too, and then I'll get to the last slide of what we can do together, is groups. When you think of how groups form, Hezbollah, Greenpeace, and AARP all have one thing in common, like many groups, is that they started with a single incident, a single point of passion, a single person who really cared deeply about something, and it blossomed over time into a very powerful group. They all have a similar story, they just have very different outcomes of what they've done. So the real question here is, where's the next group? So it's not, are we doing a good job against ISIS? We are, right? And I think a lot of people would say we are. Even if you say we're not, it's not the point. The point is there's another group forming and another group forming. And as part of what they do with the disinformation is you're kind of rolling the dice and stoking things and seeing who you can get to catalyze who might be that next leader of a Hezbollah-like group or another group like that. So, if bad actors are organized, why not us? What I found in doing this work, NGOs don't talk to each other. Corporations don't talk to each other. The government and corporations don't talk to each other. We do a fantastic job of not communicating to each other, right? So when you think about that, we need our own army of soft power. If we have our own army of soft power, these are at least 4 things in the book that we wrote. We have a lot of stuff in there. But these are 4 things for today that I want to end with. One is aggregate. Data.world was created right here by Brett Hurt and his team. They are taking the public data sets of the world and harnessing them in one place. We have a countering hate section in there, and we want to try to get people to put bias, hate, and extremism data sets in one place so data scientists can look at it and see trends quicker in terms of what's actually happening. Research. We do a lot of research in the marketing world to map out the customer journey. We want to know exactly how someone's going to buy a PC and when. Why can't we do a pre-hate journey so we can actually see how people move from bias, hate, and extremism, and how do we actually intervene appropriately by country, by language, by channel, and so on? And the answer is that is starting to happen. Media. We need to work together so we actually have a powerful voice. Things like, very simple things like using the same keywords for a topic that we care about and having 100 NGOs use the same keywords actually will drive a search experience that will get our story out more effectively. That's a simple thing, or who to follow. Who are the top 500 people in the world to follow, so when you put something out, everyone's reaching folks who are going to move it, and we actually move the needle. And then last is yourself. All of us can make a decision every day with what do we do with our time. And some people will donate money, some people will donate time, some people will work with the Boys and Girls Club here in Austin, some people will help with Vetted, which is a group that I'm involved with Cassandra. But the question is, what can we do? And this is a group, you're here. I mean, this is a committed type of group to make the time to come to an event like this. So what can we all do personally? And then how do we inspire other people to not talk about this, but to actually take an action, right? And I know that sounds so simple, but as you know, most of the people you know would much rather have a cocktail and talk about it, and they don't do something. And so when we look at this, and to finish, very simple math. 7.5 billion people in the world, roughly. 7.4999 prefer peace, right? A very, very small percent want to disrupt us. So they're very organized, even when they don't look like it. They're doing a really good job being organized. We're not. We outnumber them by more than a few people. What if we actually did something together? And that's the spirit of countering hate, and I hope that you join us in doing your part. Look forward to hearing your ideas. Thank you for your time.